presidents, kings, queens, holding on till the last moment. Everybody around them is whispering, and this is the tragedy.
Trustees may find it difficult to check in with power holders, particularly to assess their capacity. They may be in different jurisdictions. They may not actually see each other very often.
If trustees have concerns that a settlor might be vulnerable but has capacity, they shouldn't just act like it's business as usual. They still need to take steps to make sure the settlor isn't being taken advantage of, because they can be criticised if they just go along with something that ultimately turns out to have been procured by some sort of undue influence.
Capacity is one of those issues that seems very simple, very straightforward, until it isn't. The settlor will often start to have an inkling that they have lost capacity as well. And a natural response then is to become proud and to become defensive.
Settlors are founders of businesses or custodians of very substantial amounts of wealth. And capacity for them can be something that they don't really want to face up to. They also tend to be concentrating more on their business interests than they do on their personal governance. The trustee can have a really steep hill to climb in order to understand what should happen next.
The settlor can and often does change their wishes over time, and that's completely natural. What trustees need to look out for, though, is when those wishes change dramatically. And that should set off alarm bells for trustees that something might not be quite right with the settlor.
It's very common for settlors to want to reserve powers of investment. And I think capacity and assessing capacity becomes a particular issue in relation to investment powers, whether the power holder fundamentally understands the nature of the decision they are taking. Now, that is one thing if you say, look, I've fallen out with my daughter, she said some nasty things about me, and I'd like to alter my letter of wishes accordingly. It's another thing if you say, I'd like to sell, please, the shares in the family company that I've held for 30 years and invest in Bitcoin.
If you had a power holder who had a lasting power of attorney, unfortunately that's not going to help very much in a trust context, but an application to the Court of Protection might help.
The Mental Capacity Act very specifically allows the Court of Protection to be able to make decisions on behalf of P, where the decision is a power holder decision, whether as trustee, beneficiary or other. The English Court of Protection might feel able to give consent, to act for P and make a decision to give consent. Where I think it gets more complex is where the protector or power holder isn't just consenting or with a power of veto, but instead is actively making a trustee decision, like adding beneficiaries, removing beneficiaries, appointing trustees. Some of those decisions I think are going to be even harder to engage on that multi-jurisdictional level because it's so part of and requires an understanding of the governing law of the trust.
Many home jurisdictions of trusts will prevent that judgment being applied. This is known as firewall legislation. Even though the Court of Protection has made an order, effectively the trust buffers it, bats it away, and says that in fact the only court which can make a decision in relation to the trust is the home jurisdiction of the trust. This interaction between domestic legislation and international trusts and the firewall provisions makes it very difficult to know at the outset how a power holder might be treated.
In terms of practical steps that trustees can take, I really advocate using some standard questions so that people can get used to being asked the same questions year after year, which will include regulatory risk, tax risk, investment risk, but also the physical and mental health of the family. And you can bring in their physical security as well to that, which is a touch point with lots of our families. So taking it in that order can sometimes help, but regularly asking questions so that they feel standard is a really good positive thing to do.